Welcome to another edition of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you're used to. I'm Lenny McAllister, and I got this spring break thing backwards because from what I was told when I was growing up, for spring break, you go places where it's warmer, not colder. But yet I got dragged to Niagara Falls, New York. Who goes to Niagara Falls, New York when it's still cold? Apparently this guy, because I love my wife and my kids. Now, three people that have been laughing at me ever since I told this story are these three wonderful colleagues right here. First, with the guy below me that thinks he's smarter than everybody else, the cat in the hat, the dude from the heart of Texas, the guy that says, it's warm here in Texas, dude. You're so stupid to go to Niagara Falls, New York and freeze. Jeff Charles, what do you have to say from your cold heart about my cold condition here in the north parts of this, United States of America?
Get back to me when you're in it for a week with no power. I'm gonna play my Texas card here and what we went through a few months ago. And I will say, there's nothing wrong with going to the colder climate. I love cold weather. So that's the type of thing that I would do. So you're not in bad company here.
Wait a minute. You just complained about the ice storms and then said you didn't mind the cold weather.
Power, though.
You gotta pick.
Like, you gotta have power.
Seems like you're playing both sides of that coin there, buddy. I get you. You gotta have power. I mean, it's something to be said about watching the ice, not being part of the ice. I give you that.
Exactly.
Let me go to the lady of the group. Aja Smith is joining us once again. Thank you for joining us. And you started teasing me by telling me something about 74 degrees. So I'm going to let you go ahead and continue with that before I cut you off, just because I should at least let you brag for a second.
Well, California, we do have great weather, but our politics is very terrible here. So maybe I can go where you're at.
Have you not followed any of the politics here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania? This would literally every place else in the country at least let construction workers work this time last year.
Nothing compares to California.
Aja, you don't have a friend in Pennsylvania, regardless of what the slogan says. Just take my word for it. Now,
okay.
The true smartest person in the room, in the group, the guy over there, Dr. Chris Metzler, and I'm not going to even start listing his degrees. We usually run it with the credits at the end of the show, and it just goes on and on and on and on. Yeah. It's embarrassing to the rest of us, so I'm not doing that at the beginning of the show. Dr. Metzler, say something smart so you can prove to people that you're really as smart as I'm saying you are.
Well, Lenny, I can feel your pain in terms of being in Niagara Falls. The only thing I have to say about that is the struggle is real.
He says this from Florida. They mock me. They mock me.
We're giving you hints.
Yes. But you know what? I don't really run anything in my marriage, so it doesn't matter what you tell me. You got to go tell the boss. I digress. Drink your drink. It's Friday, and it's been a hard week, so you're going to probably want to drink a little bit.
Yes.
Let's start, and Chris, I'm going to go to you first because you're the guy that's literally done this stuff around the world when it comes to foreign affairs. The attack at the Capitol, which they're saying is not a terrorist attack as of now. However, every time you hear something like this, especially after January 6th and the tension throughout the country over the last several years, when you hear something like this, you get nervous. Some people are going to obviously lean once again to mental health. Some people are going to lean towards domestic terrorism based on the person's background. Something's going to flare up, and it's only going to seem to exacerbate political division once again. What's your initial thoughts as you heard about this tragedy, other than obviously all of our hearts going out to the officer that, once again, we have another officer at the Capitol that lost their life?
Well, it goes to the divided nation that we find ourselves in. The issue as to terrorism, domestic terrorism, hate crime, all of that, we just don't know enough about that at this point. But what we do know is this country is deeply divided. I am not willing to blame it on the events of January 6th. I think that goes way beyond the pale. I think we just have to let the investigation go and figure out what happened. It continues to be a tragedy. The problem I have, though, is here we go again. because now the left is going to be calling for gun control. And, the whole gun control thing, look, if this gun control stuff worked, we wouldn't be having any of this. So there you go.
Correct.
Aja, what do you think?
No, he's absolutely correct. And to be honest with you, I was not shocked that this happened, especially with this administration. And so what they, the person who did this, his background is coming out saying he was a follower of the Nation of Islam and he was troubled and everything else. I just can't believe that we're back at this again for quite some time. We haven't had anything happen in a while, but I'm not surprised that this happened. And just like the doctor said, the left is going to start calling on for more gun control. But at the same time, what we learned, there was no gun involved with the person who did this attack. And we can't even really call it attack because we don't even know if he did have mental issues. We don't know the full story yet, other than his Facebook post. So I think we really need to wait and see what was really going on, if he was troubled, especially with mental health.
Jeff, when it comes to these type of things, right, it seems as though regardless of what the person's background is, they can be a lone wolf with a mental health background, but as soon as you say this guy was a follower of fill in the blank, it's automatically going to seem as though this person was radicalized and it was going down that path. Right now we're hearing about the Nation of Islam background. Look, Rush Limbaugh just passed away about, 3-4 weeks ago? If this guy was an ardent follower of Rush Limbaugh and did something at the Capitol because Joe Biden signed the $2 trillion deal, or started talking about it this week, somebody would sit there and say this person was radicalized by the late Rush Limbaugh, and that's why this was an attack. When do we move past this? Because it's coming with this incident, this tragedy, and it's going to happen with the next tragedy and the following tragedy and the following tragedy.
It's not going anywhere. I mean, the thing is, anytime something like this happens, everybody's watching. Before the information comes out about the suspect, everybody's hoping it's not them. Black people are like, please don't let it be a black dude. White conservatives, they may deny this, but I know that they do this. Please don't let it be a white conservative Trump supporter. Right. And here's the thing: I remember people doing this even when I was a kid. I mean, it was somebody did something crazy or committed a crazy crime. Especially black people are like, please don't let it be a black dude. Please don't let it be a black person. So there is an element of that to this equation, but I do think it's gotten worse because now it's not so much about not wanting to be stereotyped. It's about, I don't want my political opposition to be able to use this against me. And we know that media on both sides is just chomping at the bit, waiting to use this for their agenda. Now, as far as what causes, I mean, with the information that we have today, I'm leaning more towards mental illness. I'll change my position if more information comes out, but it sounds like this guy was nuts. We've seen people climb the gate at the White House trying to get in, and some people have gotten shot doing it. So this isn't like a novel situation. But when it comes to gun control, it's amazing how they're already trying to use it. It was only hours after the announcement that the Capitol police officer was killed, you had Ilhan Omar going on Twitter saying, well, good thing he didn't have an AR-15, because if he had an AR-15, he would have done a lot more damage. MSNBC's Mehdi Hassan did the exact same thing. So even when there's not a gun used, and even when it's not a white Trump supporter, they're trying to squeeze whatever they can out of this situation. And that's pretty disgusting. And I won't say that a lot of people on the left are doing that, because I haven't seen that just yet. I'm only seeing that from these two people. But I wouldn't be surprised if more came out trying to use this to promote gun control.
Right. Well, Dr. M, somebody, and you probably are the insider of it. You are the insider of insiders, so you probably already know who it is. But somebody's already sent out a fundraising email off of this, right? I mean, we're being cynical, but that's the truth. Right. Somebody has said, look, the wokeism of the left has struck again, which is ironic because the Nation of Islam is pretty far right, actually. Right. Yeah. But I guarantee you, somebody's written an email and said the wokeism of the left has attacked us again at the Capitol. First, it was Antifa on January 6th. Now it was the attack. We lost another officer at the Capitol. Please give me $500 to fight against this wokeism. Yeah. Where does that stop, Dr. M? I mean, do you have to start taking money out of politics before we get that crazy dynamic out of politics?
Yeah, well, I mean, taking money out of politics, I don't know that that's going to make a difference. I just think if you look at a number of the people who are running for office now, I don't believe that they're running to be elected. I think that they're running for purposes of being a cash cow. And in fact, those fundraising letters are in fact being drafted as we speak. Look at what occurred. Look at how bad it is. Give me $500 to help stop all of this radicalization of America. Come on, really? But that's pretty much where we find ourselves.
Well, and this is a conversation we've had previously. And Jeff, and I'll go to you and then I'll go to Aja. We've talked about this before, where Congress is more geared towards entertaining America than legislating or leading America. Even President Biden, who continuously said as president-elect, I'm here to unite the country. I need to bring us back together. We need to heal. We need to be together. But then every now and then he pokes the bear. And President Obama did this. He was supposed to be the post-racial, post-partisan president. But when he first got in, he did the same thing. He poked the bear. Now, I don't think Biden's been as bad as Obama has been, because I think in part Biden doesn't have the political cachet that Obama had. But Jeff, you don't see that cause to heal and bring the country together, even through tragedies like this, because even when those that have the upper hand are sitting there watching this, it's to your point, they're using it to try to make a statement versus giving the other side grace and then trying to use that moment to say we're all Americans.
Yeah, you know what? And what I'm about to say, I would say about any president. First off, I don't think Biden was sincere about the whole unity thing. And the thing is, I don't care. He's there to do a job. He's supposed to manage the executive branch. We should never have placed the presidency at this level of importance. The president should never be on this pedestal. That position was never intended for that purpose. So I shouldn't be relying on Joe Biden to unite the country. I shouldn't be relying on President Trump to unite the country. I get that, and sometimes if there's a serious crisis going on, then you want somebody out there saying everything's going to be okay. I get that part. But as far as that goes, it's not his job to unite. So I see most of the division coming from media figures, other politicians, people who are out there doing performative art, and they're supposed to be in Congress. Those are the ones who are further dividing us. I'm sorry, I can't really put this at the feet of Biden. Is he doing everything he can to unite? No, but at the same time, I don't see it as his job. I'm looking more towards other people pushing messages that are designed to unite, or the opposite, and they're the ones that are doing it.
Yeah, but I disagree, Jeff, and I'm going to go to Aja, then back to you to give you a chance to kind of redirect, if you will. I'm playing attorney today, Dr. Metzler. You like that? I'm borrowing your JD for just
redirect.
I read that or heard that somewhere. We'll get into the George Floyd trial. I'm certain that's where I got it from. Aja, but I mean, the president, in many regards, should be the unifier in chief. And Jeff said, when there's crisis, maybe. Look, this country has not been much more divided other than maybe, 1861 and maybe, 1961. Other than that, this country has been pretty darn divided. And if there's ever a time for a president to step into this void, it would seem to be now. But, kind of to Jeff's point, we haven't seen too many presidents that have really been really equipped to do it effectively for the long term. I think Bush 43 did a pretty good job after 9/11. I think there were certain instances where maybe Obama was okay in certain instances, but for the long term, that long-term healing that this country really needs, we haven't really had a president over the last, I'd say, 25 years that's really been adept at doing it.
Well, I have to agree with Jeff. Rarely I agree with Jeff, but I do agree with Jeff. It's a new level of kabuki theater,
right,
to me. And when you mentioned about George W. Bush, I joined the military after 9/11 because I wanted to fight the war on terrorism. And George Bush was like, "Hey, we're going to fight the war on terrorism. We're going to do this. We're going to do that." And I was one of those that raised my right hand and said, "Yes, I'm going to be part of this united front." But at the same time, we have to take personal responsibility, especially at the local level. I can't look for the president of the United States to solve all my problems, because the local level is part of my problem when it comes to city council, when it comes to school board, where we have left basic civics and keep looking at the White House to solve our problems instead of looking at our local level and state level. And that's why living here in California, we're such in the mess we are in today, because everybody forgot that, hey, there's 3 levels of government or 4 levels of the government, depending on how your system is set up. Like mine is the local level, the county supervisor, the supervisor level, the state level, and then the federal level. And we had to get back to basic civics by holding our local electeds responsible, then our county sheriffs, our county supervisors, and so forth. Where I do feel that if there is a tragedy, the president or whoever the figurehead is up in the White House, regardless of what political party and administration, they should say, hey, let's come together and kumbaya. But we all know that's not going to work because we're so partisan. But at least at the local level is nonpartisan and is supposed to be nonpartisan. And we can all say, hey, let's have a candlelight vigil. And I've seen that in my local community. Hey, let's get together and do a food drive. To me, that's bringing unity in my local community instead of looking towards Washington, D.C. to do it for me.
Okay, but Jeff, on the redirect, isn't there at least some type of obligation to project leadership from the presidency, to project unity from the presidency, even if you're not looking for the president, to Aj's point, to solve all your problems? I mean, and I get down with that. Okay, you can't look for the federal government to be this Leviathan that's going to solve everything, because that's when you end up having this Leviathan that gets in the way. But isn't the president's job a very unique position, much like your mayor or your governor, where that chief executive has to project leadership in a very effective way, in a long-term manner, to set the tone so that everything else can come into place in an efficient and proficient manner?
You know, after 9/11, like Aj was saying, George W. Bush, whatever you think about him, he showed remarkable leadership in using that to unite us. He tried to calm the situation down. He was that person trying to give that comfort. He was a commander-in-chief of the military. So in that situation, it is appropriate for him to come out and say things like, you know, it's going to be okay. This was a horrible tragedy. I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again. I'm going to make sure those who did it are punished. Nothing wrong with that. But Lenny, you just said presidents haven't been adept at bringing about unity under normal circumstances. I'm glad that that's not what they're supposed to do. Imagine relying on the government to unite the country. If it's the government that's uniting the country, we are in huge trouble. It's like Aja said, it should be down to your community. Maybe your mayors and your city council members, they're part of the community too, so I see nothing wrong with that. But unity has to be done within ourselves. But it should be done by the culture, not by the government.
What do you think, Dr. M?
Yeah, no, I think they're both absolutely right. Look, I don't, from the standpoint of the president, I think Jeff is extremely right here. I don't, look, the reality is the president is a figurehead. I don't care what party they're from, they're a figurehead. And the only way that this role of really being the great uniter works is if the president were nonpartisan. And the president is not nonpartisan. It is a political party. So at the end of the day, I don't even look to the president for that. I look to the president to serve as the CEO of America. I need the trains to run on time. I need you to use my tax dollars efficiently. And that's what I need you to do. All that other stuff, I don't really care. It's not your job to unify me. And anybody who believes that a president will unify the nation is sadly mistaken.
Well, let me say this before we talk about a situation that has divided us very much so and has the potential to do so once again this year, just like it did last year. You know, when it comes to the presidency, if people were not going to look to at least the bully pulpit, not just of the country, but dare I say the world, for some type of tone setting in regards to how we should act or what we should focus on, you know, are we to a point in time in America where we're over 320 million people in a time where everything from social media to television shows are guiding what we do? And back to the previous point, where people are electing members of Congress, governors, based on popularity contest. Again, Jesse Ventura was a governor. I mean, Sonny Bono, the late Sonny Bono, was a congressperson. We won't even get into Matt Gaetz because Matt Gaetz' whole situation is for another show, because that's a whole nother mess of just reality show meets have I showed you this picture in my cell phone, which is beneath a congressperson, or at least it used to be. But then again, the United States Congress used to house Klans members, so I digress. Maybe it never really was beneath them. Speaking of division, because we can be going down that path for a while, the George Floyd trial is finally going on in Minnesota, and we're approaching a point of time where if this goes a particular way, what we saw in May and June could be peanuts compared to where this country could be and what we could be seeing in the streets if the verdict is anything other than a guilty. Now, Aja, I'm not trying to speak in hyperbole, but are you looking at this the same way and saying, wow, I remember Rodney King. We saw videotape and then we saw Simi Valley. We've seen the George Zimmerman trial where we saw the situation. We saw his background. George Zimmerman had a path with domestic violence and violence, and we saw how that turned out. Man, if we see what went from 8 minutes to 9 minutes and 29 seconds of a police officer on a man's neck and he doesn't get convicted, what happens? Are you thinking that way, or are you just saying, I think cooler heads will prevail regardless of what the verdict's going to be?
It's going to be the biggest riot you will see in this nation. I was a little kid when Rodney King happened, and I lived through it. I have family members down in Los Angeles, and they had to stay in their houses and everything. So when we see this go on every 5 years, every 2 years, George Zimmerman, Michael Brown, and everybody else, it's going to be, I can't even imagine and how it's going to portray across the country. I think it's going to be the worst of the worst. I do have to give Sean Hannity some type of credit. Actually, I do give him credit for talking about this case, where he's saying how I can't even call him a police officer, how he was wrong. And I remember watching the video, and I literally cried when I saw it happen. I said, what is going on here? This man is dead. And so I've been watching the case. Unfortunately, I have to watch it on CNN because Fox News won't show it, but that's okay. But I want to be informed and know what's going on and how to prepare. But at the same time, this is something that we've experienced in our country for the past 20 or 30 years. I remember my grandmother talking about the Watts riots. Of course, I wasn't born then, but what happened during that time. And this is where we're going to have to see how, as some people say, how will this administration react to it? How would anybody react to what's going to happen if he's found not guilty or with a lesser charge? And this is something that we're going to have to start talking about, is the elephant in the room when it comes to these types of trials. And I do predict it will be a big, regardless of how the outcome, guilty or not guilty, is going to be on the charge and how many years, if he does spend any years in federal prison, this person is going to get. And that's what it's going to determine. And I tell everybody, even my Republican friends, I said, this is something you're going to have to pay attention to, even though there's a lot of things going on right now with the border crisis and everything. But this is something that's going to really reshape and how we look at police reform, how we're going to look at criminal justice reform. And I'm just going to really just sit out and wait. But my prediction is, if he is found guilty with the lesser charge or even not guilty, just be prepared for one of the biggest riots you'll see that we've had in the last 20 or 30 years.
Dr. M, remind me if I'm correct on this, but I do believe with the Walter Scott situation in South Carolina, that the police officer there went to jail on federal charges, but it was a hung jury on the state charges, when again, cell phone video showed plain as day. The police officer falsified reports and says, he was struggling for my gun and I had to defend myself. The cell phone video comes out, dude's running away, he's shooting Walter Scott in the back. And that's still, if I remember correctly, the state charges went one way, the federal charges are what actually sent that police officer to jail. So as an attorney, when you look at this and you see once again the American justice system providing a different verdict or a different process of the judicial system, than what the average American expects. Is it any surprise that we have this anxiety again?
No, I don't think there is any surprise that we have the anxiety, but let me just add a couple points here. First of all, I used to be an assistant attorney general in the state of Minnesota. Now, here's the difference you have with this case. The prosecutor, the lead prosecutor, has been deputized as a deputy attorney general. He has an amazing law practice in Minnesota. He is the king of evidence and trial advocacy. Here's the brilliance of what he's done so far. What he's done is he has put the case forward. He has taken away the defense arguments about the drug use, and all of those folks who are up there are prosecution witnesses. The defense has not started its case yet, because in fact, he's putting all of that stuff out front. That's number one. Number two, the defense attorney, because I've worked with both of these guys. Defense attorney, he does two areas of law. Number one, he defends police. Number two, he is a DWI attorney. Okay. And so what you have in this case, keep in mind the way that the prosecutor is doing this. There are two concepts that are important here for juries. The first is primacy. Okay. So in other words, what do you hear first? The prosecution is putting its case together. So there's primacy and there's recency. And so what that means is primary is what you hear first, recency is what you hear last. So at the end of this case, the prosecution is going to bring this all together. It has been so far a brilliant legal strategy. And so this is the first time in all of these cases you have someone prosecuting a case who is not a career prosecutor, who is a king of evidence in the state of Minnesota, who understands jury trials. He is, and by the way, he's Black, understands how all of this works. And so I think in this particular case, it is going to be very difficult, absent, if there's jury nullification, it's going to be very difficult. The prosecution has total control of this at this point. And the defense's case so far is this: the crowd made me do it. That's their defense. There was an angry mob. And so what angry mob? What are you talking about? But this has been what they've done. So I have more faith in this prosecution than any other that I've seen.
Wow.
And I get that, but Jeff, we all Black on here, right? I mean, I think the red, the black, the black of red and black, I think still applies, even though if you talk to some Black folks on the left, they would tell you that we ain't really Black, including Joe Biden, by the way. But we won't get into that.
Right.
That was a year ago. Him and Charlemagne, I think, buried that. Anyhow, with that said, though, we have seen this play out. Again, we were told that Rodney King was resisting arrest, after a while. We were told that Walter Scott was fighting for the gun. We've heard this time and time and time and time again, and we've seen one person on a jury, just one, say, well, that's not what I saw, that's not what I heard. And it's both the beauty and the curse of the American justice system, Jeff, particularly when you're Black. You can always see these type of hangups come about, and it seems to put us further and further back when it comes to race relations.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and I was actually surprised to hear that doctor was so positive about this, because I don't disagree with anything that that you said, but that's actually encouraging. But however, I mean, I'm still kind of thinking, this is Minnesota, and no offense to people from Minnesota, but everybody who's lived there that I've known has said it's a very racist state. So,
but wait a minute, can't you? Wait, hold on, Jeff. Can't you say that? I mean, put it in Georgia, where Atlanta is, but you're telling me you wouldn't find black people that would say, well, it is Georgia. Put it in Pennsylvania.
That's true.
Put it in Pittsburgh, and you would say the same thing. So it's less about the actual state, is it not? Isn't it more about the United States than the actual state when you talk about these type of state cases?
Well, that makes sense, but I mean, we have to acknowledge there are areas of this country that are more racist than others. I mean, realistically, that's true. But at the same time, I mean, my concern is the way that
Florida, Florida had the George Zimmerman case. I mean, that should not have happened in Florida. California had the Rodney King case.
Correct.
That should not have happened in California. So I understand what you're saying, but taking a step back again, as an African American in 2021, after everything we went through in 2020, including the George Floyd situation, and then going back over the last several years, does it really matter what state we're talking about? I understand your point. I'm not trying to push back on the point, but I'm trying to actually, exemplify the point where it's more than just it's Minnesota. This is what the United States of America has been when it comes to black people with these type of situations for decades.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true about the country at large, but I'm just making the point that I'm looking at likelihood here. I mean, and when I'm seeing a state that is more known for racism, then I'm gonna allow that to be more part of the conversation than I would otherwise. But at the same time, I mean, we do have an issue where, like Aja said, I mean, my concern is the overcharging, because that's what happened in Trayvon Martin's case. They overcharged Zimmerman, and yes, a big part of me thinks that they did that on purpose so he would get off. I'm wondering if that's the same thing here, because I don't think that the higher charges, they're going to be able to convict on that. If he gets convicted of second-degree manslaughter or whatever the charge is, then either way, the people who want the division and want the riots, either way, they get what they want, because I do think that there will be some rioting if he is convicted on manslaughter. I think it would be less than what it was if he would have gotten off. But still, either way, you're going to see people use this for political purpose, regardless of the outcome. Honestly, I think that there's a lot of people on the far left, not everybody, but on the far left, who don't care what the outcome is. They're going to push their narrative no matter what.
Yes,
Aja, do not call me a statist, because I know somebody's going to call me a statist after I go back to the power of the presidency. So don't do it, especially the professor up there in the upper right-hand corner.
I won't do it.
I mean, he's sitting there, he got a twinkle in his eye. I can see it in his glasses already. I don't know if it's the wine, because I've only said I digress twice. Oops, now 3 times. Or if he's waiting to blast me on something professorially. But Aja, what does Joe Biden do if this case goes sideways? Because talk about a major threat to your presidency. You're coming in after June 6th. You have to still deal with the pandemic. You have the jobs that are coming back. They added over 900,000 this past month, but we saw that 300,000 went away in December. So you're still dealing with this economy, reopening the economy. And if this case goes sideways, what does a President Joe Biden, a guy that just tripped up the steps 2 weeks ago, that is going on 80, and look, we're talking about an older guy that doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to race relations, that would have to really heal something. How could that possibly play out, whether it's good for the country or bad for the country, if this case goes sideways?
Joe Biden is not going to do is going to be Kamala Harris, because Joe Biden is incapable to even formulate a speech or to unite us, as we discussed earlier, especially with the African American community. He's going to ask Kamala Harris to do it, just like he asked her to handle the border crisis, because he has nothing. He can't handle it. And like you said, and I'm not going to make fun of him too much falling up the stairs, because to me it's pure elderly abuse for him to be in the White House. But at the same time, he won't know what to say. And if he does say something, it's going to be a well-scripted teleprompter and with no questions, and to get off the stage and go back into his room in the White House. But he's going to have Kamala Harris say it, and that's going to be very interesting, knowing her background as the former Attorney General here in California, and with her reputation and how she put a lot of African Americans in jail. So we're going to be looking at Kamala Harris to make that statement, and also the United States Attorney General, but not Joe Biden.
Well, and Chris, here's where it's interesting, right? So I'm not necessarily I don't go into the he doesn't have it, his mental faculties are gone, that's why he tripped up the steps. That's not where I go to in regards to the tripping up the steps. For me, it's energy. You got to have a lot of energy in that position. One of the things that people loved about Trump on the right was the fact that even though he was a guy in his mid-70s, ate McDonald's, Big Macs for breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner and dessert, and tweeted at 3 o'clock in the morning, was the fact that he seemed to have an endless amount of energy. And for that position during crisis, people respond to that. Now, to Aj's point, Chris, if it's a guy that's not as high on energy right now, going on 80, going through a lot, and then Kamala Harris with her background and her inability, quite honestly, it seems as though to be able to reach across the aisle when you would need to reach across the aisle and unite people, this is sounding like a recipe for disaster if this case goes sideways.
Well, actually, he's not going to give it to Kamala. Here's what's going to happen. Lisa Monaco and Vanita Gupta, who are the two deputy attorney generals, Vanita is going to be heading the civil rights department over at Justice. He's going to give it to those two to bring federal civil rights violations. That's what he's going to do. It's going to be, it's going to be Vanita and Lisa. They're going to handle it. That's who he's going to designate it to, because he can't give it to Kamala. That would be a complete joke. And so he can't do that. He can't do it himself. He's not even going to know what he's talking about because he doesn't even understand how the justice system works. So he'll give it to those two women under the direction of Merrick Garland. That's what he's going to do.
Before I go to Jeff, number one, you're telling me a U.S. senator that's been in the Senate since 1972, who is a trained attorney, doesn't understand how the Justice Department works.
Yeah, and he's also
got to lock a Negro up.
Yeah, and he's also a trained plagiarist. But I digress.
Oh, now you want me to take a drink after you say that?
Good point.
You did bring that up. Dr. M brings up a lot of good points, Jeff, on this. But it seems as though the civil rights charges, where that was supposed to strengthen how Black people felt in regards to being equal citizens in America, that always seems to be like the silver medal. You can't get the gold medal of getting actual justice through the first bite of the apple through the criminal justice system. So we're going to give you the silver medal of putting it through the civil rights process so there can be some charges. Again, I go back to the South Carolina case. We saw a police officer literally falsify documents as he murdered a man. And you still couldn't get a conviction at the state level in South Carolina. We've already named Florida. We've already named California. We might as well go to South Carolina with this. So what they did is they went to the federal level. At some point in time, don't you think, to me, that would piss off Black people enough as well, because it does seem like that's the silver medal of all of this all the time. We can't get real justice, so at least we'll get a couple of years when it comes to, violation of civil rights, which has literally lost its sting since it was first implemented, as a real pursuit of justice decades ago.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is what it is. And going back to the point that you were making about this being a national issue, here's the thing. Here's the bottom line. If a police officer is accused of misconduct or killing somebody or police brutality, only about 30% of those actually get tried in court. Of those that are tried in court, it's about 30 to 35% that actually get a conviction. Of those who get convicted, it's only about 34 to 35. There's a lot of 30 to 35%, but it's only about 30 to 35% of them actually see jail time. President Biden can do nothing about that. Kamala Harris can do nothing about that, and neither can their attorney generals, because they're at the federal level and they're not supposed to be involved in that. So yeah, they can do the silver medal thing, but this is a problem that we have nationwide in every state, in every major city. The fact that police officers can do these things and know that most likely they'll get away with it, that is what's causing this problem, in my opinion. I mean, the hard left is talking about, oh, let's defund the police, or let's have social workers do this or that, or let's try these other solutions. And some of those may have some merit to it. But I mean, I debated an activist on Russia Today a few months ago, and I said, none of this stuff matters. This is all just window dressing. None of this matters until we have a infrastructure in place to hold officers accountable when they overstep their bounds. And we don't have that. And nobody on the left that says they care about this stuff is actually fighting for that, from what I'm saying. So that's the issue.
Aja, who fights for that? Because it seems as though Republicans are more concerned about back the blue and kind of condone some of this stuff. And the people on the left, including in Minnesota, are more about, hey, let's just defund the police because we don't really need them. We'll just have people go in there and throw some holy water and everybody will kind of course correct their behavior and everything will be cool. Who fixes this, Aja?
The people that they elect. And you have to start vetting your candidates better. You have to start getting better common sense candidates and people elected, starting at the local level. And I'm one of those people that I ran and I was backed by the blue, but I was also endorsed by my sheriff. I was endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police in California, but we all had an understanding where even my local sheriff said, you know, I do believe in police reform. I do believe in accountability. And he's one of our best sheriffs that we've had in such a long time, Sheriff Chad Bianco. And him and I had this long conversation before he endorsed me when it came down to accountability and transparency within the police department. So it's electing people who have that understanding to unite citizens and also have a working relationship with the community. And that's what people really need to start doing, is getting to know the candidates, to have a working relationship, and especially when it comes down to the local level. And I was one of those candidates that said, hey, I want a seat at the table and bring us together to talk about these issues that you have within the community, especially in the minority community, with the Hispanic and Latino and Black communities, because this is where it hurts us most, where my district is more heavily Hispanic and Latino, and even reaching out to the pastors and other, the NAACP and other people to say, hey, if we're going to vote for you and back you, we need to know where you stand. And I told them where I stood. And I also said, I do have a working relationship with the sheriff and other police officers who were all in agreement and how we do need more accountability. But the problem is that, you know, certain states, like you said, the far left, they want to defund the police. You see what's going on in Seattle and Portland, where they're actually tearing down the police stations. You can't have that. And of course, some on the right, the far right, they said, no, we have to have strict law and order. So you need to find people who have a better balance and a better understanding, that who want to be elected and represent the people and bring people together, especially when it comes to community safety. Nobody wants to defund the police, but nobody wants another George Floyd to happen in their area.
Now, you know, I can be really snarky and say I can figure out one elected official that would be really good at unifying the people that has the platform to do so. I shouldn't say that, should I? Just because it would seem like I'm being a statist, and I don't want to antagonize the professor, and I don't want to piss off the other two analysts on this show.
I don't think you're a statist.
Digress and not say anything.
Uh-oh.
See, somebody was going to be needled. Let me tell you what's being needled right now. It's the people at the border, where just not too long ago, and I'm not talking about during the Trump administration, I will even go back to the Obama administration. You had some of this start to slow down. In fact, it's interesting. In Waukegan, Illinois, they are renaming a middle school from Thomas Jefferson Middle School because of his background with racism. They're looking for another name. They're looking to pick Barack and Michelle Obama Middle School. Well, guess who's piping up and saying, that's not what you should be doing for a majority Latino middle school? It's the Latino community that's sitting there saying, did you notice their immigration policy while he was in the White House for 8 years?
That's awesome.
So let's now contrast that with what's going on at the border now. And I'm going to go to our world traveler, Dr. Metzler. You have Joe Biden, who through his messaging during his campaign and after he got elected as president-elect, basically told people, listen, we took the locks off the doors. So if you want to come in and get some chips or watch a few shows or just kind of hang out, we got your back. You could stick around for a while. Wants him in the White House on January 20th. And now we have this crisis at the border all over again that he's trying to pivot away from a political standpoint, and he's having a harder and harder time doing so.
Yeah, and he's having a harder and harder time doing so because, in fact, his policy relative to the border is simply asinine. That's just the fact. He has encouraged this. It's causation. By the way, children just decide on their own to just randomly walk to the border and then come over the fence
all at the same time.
All at the same time. And I'm sorry, some of those folks who I've seen in those pictures, you are telling me you walked all the way to come to the border. Your makeup is perfect. Your hair looks good. And you on an iPhone. Okay.
Right.
So what are you talking about? And he doesn't understand the basics of asylum, because the idea is, I think, for the Democratic Party to bring these folks here illegally, have them vote for the party because the party realizes that, in fact, it is losing power. Look, I was going to tell a few of my Haitian brothers and sisters, look, the border is open. Come on down to Miami, get in the boat. I'll come on over here. I bet you they won't get the same treatment. So
no,
that's fundamentally, that's the problem. Look, Democrats, this is about the Democrats really trying to get a new voting population, number one. Number two, and how are you going to tell me my kids need to learn remotely, but you're taking a teacher to go teach those kids in person? And by the way, you're talking about stop the spread, wear a mask, and I have more than half of those folks don't even have COVID tests before they come over here. Are you kidding me? It's asinine. And what is Kamala going to do about it? Giggle? I mean, because that's all she does about everything. So there you go.
So look, let me go to the Californians here. And Jeff, I'm going to go to you first because you're a little bit more removed from living in California, but you still live in a border state in Texas. You've seen this much of your life. As this is flaring back up, I mean, the question has to then become, one, where's the sense of fairness? Number two, where's the sense of humanity with this? Because one can make the case letting them in is humane, but another argument could be made is that if you're encouraging them to come from Central America and risk life, limb, rape, and death for thousands of miles to get to a border, to then be detained and be possibly separated from your family again, because the same horror stories we heard under Trump, we're starting to hear again now. How humane is that? How much of a moral authority is the United States of America if this is going right back down the wrong direction with, quote unquote, a more kinder, gentler president? I know I borrowed that from a Bush, but that's what Biden's trying to make himself out to be, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, where's the morality? Where's the humanity? Well, why would you have humanity for a political pawn? I mean, that's what this is. This is what Biden wanted. During the Democratic debates, he said, I want a surge of immigrants at the border. Now, I'm sure he would say that he didn't mean it like that. But at the same time, it's hard for me to believe that his team didn't anticipate this. If they didn't anticipate this, they are completely incompetent. But to me, I'm with Dr. M. They want that electoral advantage. So they don't care about the humanity of it. They don't care about the fact that a lot of these unaccompanied minors get trafficked. They don't care about any of that. They're not even doing much to stop it. So this is going to be what it is for the next 4 years. And what's sad is that I can't even say it'll get better when Republicans take over, because they don't care either. They want more of this too. Yeah. So it's a situation where, I mean, the left, they don't even pretend to want to do something about this. So I can't really, talk about them. But for the people who talk about it, maybe this is yet another reason why we need to get the establishment out and get actual conservatives in office who can come up with humane solutions without allowing for unfettered illegal immigration into the country.
Okay, yeah, but here's the question. What's an actual conservative these days? Because I know who goes in and says that they're conservative, and those are people that we just referenced about 40 minutes ago that will take a news story and ask you for $500, and they know how to say the talking points, and they know that if they get on Tucker's show or Hannity's show, that quote unquote gives them, the blue check mark of being a real conservative, and they couldn't rattle off 3 conservative values if they were literally sitting on, I don't know, a bunch of periodicals from the Heritage Foundation. So what is going to be the solution aside from getting quote unquote real conservatives where that doesn't even have a definition yet, Aja?
And that's a great point. And that's where I look at a lot of these conservatives and a lot of these activists and all these grifters who say, well, it's all about talking points. And that's it. I remember when Ronald Reagan, as a kid, gave 11 million people an amnesty. So that set the tone of what we see in today. And guess what? He was a Republican president. So you can't always blame the Democrats. You have to start put some blame on your own party. What bothers me is that nobody's talking about the drugs that are coming over. Nobody's talking about the little baby that was thrown in the river and a border patrol agent had to save it. Nobody's talking about the true human trafficking, because a lot of the people from the right and the left, they just say, oh, here's little children, and they always use children to push their agenda. But at sometimes you're going to have to maybe say, let's start talking to the presidents of Mexico and Honduras and all these other countries to see what they need to do to keep the people out. Now, I know the president of Mexico spoke out against it because he said he's sick and tired of it. And this is where you need a strong administration, which we don't have. And we did have one, I believe, the last administration, the Trump administration, but we don't have a strong administration. But we need to start asking these questions. How many terrorists are actually coming through here through the Middle East? How many people are coming here to run guns and drugs? And this is part of the problem with California and all the border states. I'm only about an hour and a half away from the border. So I've been to the border, and it's literally it's a shamble, and there's other things that goes on at the border, including toxic waste that's coming through California that nobody talks about. But at the same time, you're not going to get either party to come with any type of reform or anything to stop, because they want to constantly use these crises as a crisis narrative. And that's how everything keeps going around and around, especially, I'll use, for instance, black on black crime. They love to talk about black on black crime, but they don't have a solution on black crime. But they're colorblind people, but they talk about black on black crime, but they don't see color. So when it comes to immigration, when it comes to legal immigration, when it comes to illegal immigration, nobody really has a solution. And I don't think anybody will have a solution for the next 10 years, because you're not putting people that have a fair understanding. You have a lawmaker that probably lives in Minnesota, doesn't even know what goes on in the southern states. I mean, the southern border states, such as Texas and California, Arizona and Nevada. But you have these lawmakers that don't even live down here. They don't even visit. Well, recently I know that Senator Graham and a couple other senators did go to the border and said it was disgusting. But at the same time, what are you going to do about it? We're going to have to start holding both parties accountable to start fixing this issue. We're going to have to say enough is enough, because you're putting a lot of children at danger. And I do have a compassion with the children. And of course, they didn't come over here and just walk and decide to walk to America. A lot of them were probably kidnapped. A lot of them were probably sold. This is literally human slavery. And when they come over here, they have to pay off those coyotes.
Yeah.
And so this is where we're going to have to start getting involved in the local level, when start supporting what's going on here, instead of looking at the federal level and start saying we need better security, because now you're promoting human slavery. Because a lot of these people come over here, they have to pay off thousands of dollars of debt, and if they don't do it, their families are going to get probably killed because they owe the money. And you have a lot of children that are separated, and who knows where they're going to go. And like the doctor said, where are the COVID tests? I think I saw Dr. Fauci earlier this morning saying, well, I'll go down to the border and do a border test. Oh, please. You're going to tell me that do a COVID test. You're going to tell me I had to wear a mask for the past year and kids could not go to school, but you're allowing all these children to come here with no masks, no shots, no vaccines. You don't even know what other types of issues that they have, especially mental health issues. They're getting raped. They're being put in cages and stacked up on top of each other. This is where the American people are going to have to hold both parties accountable and say this has been going on way too long since the Reagan administration when it comes to illegal immigration.
So let me ask this question real quick, Dr. M, because we got to wrap up the show. I know you have a point. The question I was going to ask you is, simply put, with all this going on, is this going to end up being one of the crises that Biden is going to be judged on for his presidency overall, even though it's happening this early in his presidency?
Yeah, I think it will, because he's not going to have a solution. Look, the bottom line is the left wants the votes, the right wants cheap labor, and we don't need Ted Cruz on the border doing some asinine video. What in the heck was that video he did about here I am and I saw the coyotes and I saw the dude? Really?
I don't mean to cut you off because we got to end the show. I can tell you the answer to that question very quickly. He was looking for Cancun this time, not on a plane, and he got lost. That's what happened.
Oh, man. That's my senator, y'all.
Yeah, I know. That's your senator. Which, by the way, speaking of people that probably should retire soon and kind of end their career, I want to show you all a guy that is a 91-year-old police officer. This dude is still on the case. I believe he's in Louisiana. I have to check out the story once again. So I'm going to ask you all before I go very quickly. What would you be doing at 91 years old that you'd be getting paid for if you're still working at 91? I'm going to go with the lady first since she's only 27. Aja,
thank you.
See, you like I did that. At 91 years old, what are you doing as a job that you're still getting paid for that you love, like this gentleman is doing here, being a police officer? What is it? Real quick.
I couldn't even imagine. I hope I do see 60 with the rate we're going with the COVID and everything else. But I have to say, he's probably the best sheriff. He reminds me of Andy Griffith, and he's probably very well respected.
So he got an ampy making pies, and he got a Barney Fife. That might not be the best thing for him. Jeff,
I know.
What at 91? What's the job you want to be getting paid for and still be doing 9 to 5, putting it in?
Exotic dancing.
I knew you were going to say that. I absolutely
That's what I was
knew you were going to say that. Goodbye. I think I'm going to end the show early with you. You got to go. I'm going to ask somebody that has a real answer. Dr. Metzler, please correct this very quickly before we go.
Well, I actually would be in the Caribbean cooking Caribbean food. That's what I'd be doing.
There you go.
Come on, Olive, come on, young man. Come on, have some food, give me. That's what I'd be doing.
Now,
if dancing in the Caribbean, I'm just asking.
Yes.
Literally 10 seconds, Mr. Gigolo. What are you doing this week? 10 seconds.
Well, check out my podcast on YouTube, A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. I recently did a 3-hour live stream on the history of the Republican Party and its relationship to the Black community and how it lost the Black vote. Check that out. I've even cut it up and broken it down into smaller pieces. So check that out on my YouTube channel, A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. And you can get me on Twitter at Jeff on the Right.
Thank you very much, sir. 5 seconds, Aja. What are you doing this week?
I am going to church. And I'm going to eat ham, turkey, greens, and macaroni and cheese on Sunday.
And you'll do that until you're 91 years old and you'll get paid for it.
I sure will.
Great job. Mr. Doctor, lawyer, and apparently cook at 91 years old. 10 seconds. What are you going to be doing this week?
Well, first, Jeff's a goat. That's it. Yeah. He's that series. Oh, you got to see it.
It was great.
Fantastic. What I'm going to be doing is I actually am putting together a group of investors to come up with the idea of supporting candidates who can actually make policy decisions. So not the traditional PAC. My conversation with the investors has been investing in America. And so more to come on that.
Love it.
Fantastic on that. Meanwhile, I'm going to let you go quickly without saying anything else because the image of Jeff Charles doing exotic dancing at 91 years old is enough to truncate any type of ending for this show. So just Pepto-Bismol, lots of sleep, lots of prayer. We'll see you next week.